Grief is the gateway to ecstasy, to vision, to passion, to understanding, and then wisdom. Grief is your gateway to sight. When you are depressed, you are in resistance to dealing with whatever inner truths are going on. Then the grief actually, when we cry for 10 minutes or more, we actually change the neurons in our brain.
Welcome to the Awaken Magazine podcast, where influential, conscious leaders come to share the real stories behind their spiritual journey and how they're helping others awaken to love. I'm your host, David Trotter, and today I'm excited to introduce you to Tracee Dunblazier. She's a grief counselor, shaman, publisher, and best-selling author, including this book called Transformative Grief, an ancient ritual of healing for modern times. Now, Tracee's also a featured speaker at our upcoming event called Awakened Lifestyle Expo on Sunday, December 7th, 2025 in Costa Mesa, California. You can get tickets at awakenedlifestyleexpo.com. Now, during our conversation, she shares with us her own lifelong journey of experiencing and expressing and coming to acknowledge her own psychic capabilities, her abilities as an empath, and even now as a shaman. I loved her story of talking about how her boss used her as a gift with purchase in a retail location. You have got to hear this part of her story. She also helps us through this process called transformative grief of reframing the way that we see and experience loss or transitions in our life. She talks about how she believes that crying opens up portals to wisdom, to our ancestors, and even to galactic realms. Very, very fascinating part of our conversation. And of course, she gives some very practical tips on how to experience grief as something that we would really live through on a daily basis as we experience all sorts of transitions, not just the loss of a loved one. Now, if you are drawn to these types of conversations that go beyond the surface, you are in the right place. I want to encourage you to subscribe to the Awaken Magazine podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music. Click subscribe, leave a rating or a review. That's an easy way for you to help us spread the word about these inspiring interviews that we release each and every week. All right, let's dive into my conversation with Tracee Dunblazier. Tracee, thank you so much for joining us today. It is great to be with you.
It's really good to be here. I'm so glad to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you too. You're so bright and colorful. My goodness, I just feel like I'm looking at this explosion of joy is what I'm looking at.
I can't help myself.
I love it. Well, in light of so much joy that I'm looking at across the screen, I am curious about what you sense is going on in our world right now, because there is joy in the world, but there's also challenges, right?
Yes.
As with any generation, but it seems like the generation that we're living through right now is really going through something. What do you sense that we are going through?
Well, it's so multi-leveled, but the planet is deciding what she's going to do, and we as individuals are deciding what we're going to do, who we want to be, the values that we want to have, recognizing or what's the word I want? Recognizing or denying the interconnectedness of all things, because in my opinion, we are all interconnected. Whether or not you acknowledge it or you don't acknowledge it, that is happening. So the outside world has an impact to your inside world. And how you perceive that, how you relate to that, how you receive it, comes from your set of values, patterns, and how you see yourself, and then how you see the world. And all of that is coming to a head. Like we're having to choose ourselves in connection with others, or the illusion that we are separate. And so it's and I feel like the world and all of these different events that are going on are happening to push groups of people to their own perspective. Right? So there's each individual within the group, and then there are groups, right? And there are, hundreds of groups, whatever. Everybody's having to really take a deep reflection or be pushed to something that requires them to reflect.
The words that come to my mind as you describe that is defining moment.
Yes.
Like it's helping us define what we value, as you
Yes.
just said, right?
Yeah.
And then also helping us define or recognize, do we really recognize that we're interconnected? And
Right.
if we are interconnected, how does that, our values are definitely going to bleed into
Right.
those relationships because of our interconnectedness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I am so curious about your own story about awakening to mindfulness, consciousness, spirituality. Did you grow up in a home that had some sort of faith or spirituality? Where did you grow up? Tell us the story.
Well, I grew my family, we called it mental illness. I was born with all of the clairs, being clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient, just understanding. I had a very deep connection with all of the past lives I have lived. I don't know that I could communicate it that way for certain, but I used to have dreams all the time, and I was very aware of other dimensional beings, and processed and understood grief on every level. And my family, like my father, was into Edgar Cayce. And
Really?
Edgar Cayce, Art Bell, and he would listen to their radio shows, and I would, when I was very young, he died when I was 12. So when I was very young, I would listen with him, and I just know that that's something that we shared, although we never got to share it, right? Because most certainly all the experiences that I was having, I never participated with any of my family. We didn't talk about it. We weren't really a church going family. I chose to go to church. I went with all of my friends. So anywhere from synagogue to baptism to First Congregational to Methodist, right? I went to all of these different churches, really, because I love churches in general. I love the buildings, but um, I loved the sanctity and the sanctuary of being in a church.
Mm-hmm.
People,
You the people, I don't know, we'll see, but you started out by saying, in my family we called it mental illness. What were you referring to when you were saying that?
well, being multidimensional, hearing
Okay.
voices, seeing beings, seeing. And at the time, I saw ghosts, demons, all kinds of energies that were out there, and intrinsically I knew who and what they were,
Mm-hmm.
because I had a very conscious perspective without the ability to communicate it.
Mm-hmm.
And mental illness ran in my family, and what they like. So my grandfather, all my grandparents, everybody had a relationship to psychicism and spiritualism and seeing and hearing energy, but being in an environment where it was unacceptable, meaning the environment they couldn't, they couldn't abide by it. You were sick, is how they saw
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, I was also I'm an empath. I still am an empath, but at the time I was, deeply affected by everything. So anyway, so that's why I said, it was, people considered it mental illness. But if I were there, when I look back energetically, I can say, oh, this person was seeing and hearing people speaking to
Mm-hmm.
him. They just weren't
Mm-hmm.
in bodies.
Mm-hmm. At what point did you develop the language to be able to articulate what you were experiencing and begin to, actually, I don't know, be able to navigate that world?
When I was 18, I moved to New York City, and I began to meet people who had a deeper understanding of it, and people from all walks of life, all ages, who very much. It's very New York City. You find a unique group of tutors. I would have this one guy in particular. I assume he was unhoused, but he sat right across from me one time. I was really grieving this one day. I don't remember what had happened, but this dude comes and he sits right in front of me and he just locks in. And he just starts stream of conscious all of this information that was just hitting, was just landing about what I was going through and where I was at. And then just before my stop, he finished and I'm seeing tears going, and I kind of bowed at him and he got up and left. I was like, okay, it's gonna be okay. But there in New York, there was people see on a whole other level, and they're conscious in it, and they're deliberate in it, and they're not afraid of it. You know what I mean? It's not always spoken, but you can always see it on people, I think. And so anyway, that was my biggest. New York City was my biggest teacher, and there were multiple tutors all the time coming from all places.
At what point did you sense, okay, I'm actually called to utilize these skills of intuition and psychic abilities? At what point did you make that decision?
Honestly, I don't know that I made that decision ever. Um, I had moved to Los Angeles. I went through a whole very deep seated depression. So my emotionalism had taken a whole other route. And I was really struggling with that. And the work that I was doing, I worked for different fragrance companies and different cosmetic companies, and I was doing special events. And one of my colleagues, whom she got readings every week from somebody in Las Vegas, and we had been. I never shared with people my abilities ever, other than the few people that knew me. And she's like, "Oh, would you do my lady's, on vacation? Will you do a reading for me?" And I said, "Sure." And then she told our boss, and he started hiring me as a gift with purchase.
No way. So you would buy cosmetics, but
Yes,
only like a small amount. That's got to be a big cosmetics purchase to get that gift. How did
right.
it work?
It was hilarious. Well, you spend whatever amount or above, and then people would come get in line. And the first event I did a fashion show at Macy's, and we had people out lined up out the door.
No
And then
way.
we went to Portland, Oregon, and it was on the solar eclipse, the weekend that Lady Diana died,
Wow.
because we were flying home and we heard that news. But we were at some mall in Portland, Oregon, and I will just never forget that literally people were lined up out to the edge and around, like there and people were having, these were little 5-minute readings, pulling a card or a rune, and people were having these cathartic experiences because they just sat in my presence, and because I was an empath. I mean, that's how it works when you sit down with somebody with these gifts, or any whatever gift they have. You connect with that, and it frees you in your own way to receive your own messages. And so in this way, people sat with me, and they were free to feel.
They were walking away down the mall, going to Spencer's Gifts, just crying. Just like, this is hilarious. What year is this? How long ago was this?
Gosh darn! So that had to have been, I'm gonna say 1994 or 95, because
Wow.
it was in that last year where we started doing. I did these special events for about 6 months, and then my boss at the time suggested that I create my own company and get a DBA and do all of that business stuff. And then I did that, and then the company sold and my job went away.
Ah,
So that was when I was like, "Oh, but I can do this thing over here." So I went and I found, for a year, I went and found 2 different stores to work at, and I took clients every day for sometimes 12 hours a day for 1
like a
year.
metaphysical store, not a Macy's. You
Yes.
didn't go to a Macy's.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. Yes, I went to metaphysical stores and really, like I said, it gave me the opportunity. So when metaphysical stores, the people that come in there are in deep need. They need something. They need an answer. They need a friend. They need a connection. They're surviving something, and a lot of them need therapy, but would never get therapy because it's not. They don't trust it, like whatever their relationship is to it.
Mhm.
Anyway, so we are kind of on that. Store psychics are very much on the front line of, you know, the deepest and worst that people can do or are affected by. Because those, people will go and tell a psychic a whole bunch of stuff that they would never tell a therapist or never trust somebody who is a part of the system, if you will.
Right, right. And so one of the things that you mentioned earlier was that you have the capacity to experience a lot of grief, to grieve things. And I'm assuming people who are coming into those metaphysical stores oftentimes might be experiencing grief as well. Did
Absolutely.
you, I know now you function as a grief counselor. At what point did you decide, okay, I want to get trained in this. I want to actually like utilize my skills in this area?
Well, so I always utilized my skills in this area because literally, I mean, you're absolutely right. Everybody that comes in is, at least all the people that came to me were experiencing grief in some way, and so I was helping them to metabolize it, to intellectualize it, to better understand the levels of what they were feeling, and to give them permission to feel it, which
Mm-hmm.
are all what grief is about. For me, grief isn't just about loss, or it's not just about death, but it's about transition. And so everybody that comes into the store, they're all transitioning in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I probably had been doing this work for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, maybe more. And then I thought that, hey, why don't I get a grief? The only reason I got certified wasn't necessarily to learn more, but was to understand how others see it. So it's basically the connection to the therapeutic world and
Mm-hmm.
Western medicine and Western ways of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very much a whole body person,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's I approach everything from that. But it is important to understand how other people break down the ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Grief counseling, people really relate to it as it relates to death and loss.
Right. Yes.
You know what I mean? There's not a lot of talk, or I mean, now today there is. I've written a book on it. There are many other people have written books where the focus is, hey, grief. You don't just grieve when somebody's dying or dead. You grieve when you believe that there's going to be a change of any sort, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the change doesn't even have to be happening, but if you in your head believe it could happen or is going to happen, the grief process starts there,
Mm-hmm.
right? So anyway, so I got the certification to better connect with another demographic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Uh, and now, how much of your work, and I know you're involved in so many different things. You've written multiple books on crystals and all sorts of things, and you head up Cover, an organization that helps other spiritual businesses. How much of your work day to day is around grief and helping people, as you said, metabolize grief?
Um, Half.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, all of the work that I do is about getting people, helping people, facilitating people to connect more deeply with themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So crystals do that, understanding patterns do that, understanding the multi-dimensional world,
Mm-hmm.
right? Everything that we do and see and feel is a representation of who we are on the inside. It becomes manifest outside us. So learning to read that, learning to better understand that helps you see yourself more clearly. And all of that is transitioning from one perspective to another.
Mm-hmm. Yes. You
right?
mentioned that you've written a book, which I happen to have right here,
Yes.
Transformative Grief, an ancient ritual of healing for modern times.
Hmm.
So you've been talking about grief just a moment about, hey, it's not just about death or dying. Um, is there a way you could just even define grief for us and then even speak to, maybe this is just my perception, but it seems like our culture tends to try to avoid grief, and
We
maybe
do.
speak to why that is the case. So maybe a definition, if you could help us with that to begin with.
Yeah. So grief is the emotional response or evidence of transition.
Hmm.
Mourning is the physical and intellectual response or evidence to that transition. I
Hmm.
grieve when someone dies, or I let I one of the examples I use in the book is the rage you feel after like five little things have gone wrong and then the coffee pot breaks. It's like, ah, I need my coffee. You know what I mean? It's like that point at which, boom, all of that emotion comes and you need to release it in order to transition you to the acceptance that you no longer have a coffee pot or you can't have coffee in this moment. And
Hmm.
then the mourning process, which says, hey, I don't have coffee, but I can take 5 minutes and go to the coffee shop and purchase one on my way to work. Problem solved. Everything's at peace now.
Hmm.
Right? So there is a process of going from one perspective or a belief into another perspective and a belief. Right now in the world, we started out this conversation. People are not who they thought they were. People are not who they present themselves to be. And we're seeing lots of people saying one thing to a certain group of people, but then saying other things to other groups of people. But it's all coming from the same one person, right? There's all of this kind of gaslighting or something that's not it's not consistent or grounded in one solid belief. It's many, and everybody must do that for themselves. What I mean by that is, I spent my very early years where my grief helped me to integrate all the multiple belief systems that I had. We are born oftentimes, like I was born multi-spirited, which means I had multiple spirits and entities that were with me. I was aware of them. I saw through their eyes. I lived through their understanding of life, and it all made sense to me. And we were all one big happy family. And then little by little, as I integrated the lessons of their presence and healed and grieved their experiences, they would leave. And I would pare down until I literally remember the day when the last spirit left and it was just me. And I was like, oh, this is what other people see. Because I never saw her. Everybody else saw her and treated me as they saw me, whatever their belief systems were about who I am. But that's not who I saw. Right. And so everybody, I know that my experience is extreme. But everybody has that kind of a story, whether it's entities, where it's multiple personalities, whether it's multiple values, whether it's opposing values, right? Somebody believes one like they're a Christian one day and then they're like, "Oh, heck no, I'm not a Christian," right? So everybody goes through phases where they adopt or experience a certain perspective and they live in that and make a decision on what works for them and what doesn't, and then they move to the next. That is happening where people would do that in lifetimes. People are doing it in years, months, days, right? So
Hmm.
the world right now, and especially the United States, is one little microcosm of that happening for everybody.
Hmm. Hmm.
And
Um,
grief is the transitioner.
right, right, right.
Yeah.
I'm curious about what like when I went through pastoral training and like the brief glimpse that we got about grief in the
Mhm.
process of helping people plan
Yeah.
their memorial or funerals,
Right.
um, 5 stages, right? That
Yeah.
tend to be outlined. I'll read denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And so I'm curious for you, when you think about those 5 stages, do you find that that concept tends to be helpful to almost be handles for people in the process of
Mhm.
grieving and mourning? Or do you find that there's a more helpful or a different way to see grief for yourself?
So I would say that the 5 stages of grief is a linear perspective. You go from one to the other to the other. Today, the world is so much more complex because we have so much more understanding than we did in the 70s when that linear viewpoint or understanding of it came. It really is a circular or spherical experience. So let's say uh, let's say somebody dies and I'm very sad, right? I have to grieve their loss. Then let's say I have complicated grief with this person. Let's say it was my mother and we didn't get along, and the last time we saw each other, we fought. Now I have to grieve that, right? That's a next level of grief. And let's say that discordant relationship between me and my mother led me to make choices, choose people, treat people in a way that was good or not good, whatever it brought to me. Now that she's gone, I have to deal with that too. So that's another circle, right? So there's the actual first hand events that happen. We grieve that. And once we grieve that, then there's another layer of grief, which is all that we did because that thing existed. Then after that, there's a third layer of grief, which is that final choice, the pattern, and what we're going to do about it. Are we going to keep it? Is it going to work for us? Or are we going to move on from it? Right. And that oftentimes for people can happen years or decades later. Right. A grieving process isn't just a 1, 2, 3 or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It is you know, so the first layer of grief is maybe those 5 stages. But then you've got to deal with those other circles of grief that come up as you begin to live a little more, and those things become important or valuable, or you see the impact of them on you.
Hmm. One of the questions that I asked a few minutes ago, I want to go back to because I'm not sure we touched base on it, is why we tend to avoid grief. Because I mean, you're telling me all these different layers, and I'm like, oh my God, I've got a job. Like this feels like a full time job to grieve the way you're talking about. Can we just, some like, can we just like have some dinner and like move on?
Like, yeah. Do we get movies and comedies in between? Um,
Right.
Here's the thing. I mean, it can be a full-time job. Again, I want to impress upon you that people can take days, weeks, years, decades to process grief, right? The loss of a parent can you still feel waves of that grief 20, 25 years later. When you make a concerted effort to work on all the layers that are connected to you in consistency, right? Which is, again, the grieving, which is the emotional aspect, and then the mourning, which is the intellectual, heart related, physical world changing, right? If you say, hey, every Friday at 2, I'm going to work on my grief,
What does that mean to work on my grief?
to instead of waiting for it to happen to you say, hey, I can see there's a change here and I see I'm resisting it. I see it makes me anxious every day. I see that I'm angry or frustrated and I'm not nice to people, or I'm not nice to myself, or I want to eat or drink or whatever. I want to do these things. We do those things to suppress the emotionalism that we're feeling. So when we say, hey, every Friday at 2, let's say I get off work at noon, have a nice lunch and sit down and do some grief work. You can sit in meditation, you can do a ritual, but you can say to yourself, hey, I felt really angry at so and so today. Why is that? Well, they said such and such, and my mom used to do that. Right? Anytime you sit and actually think about what it's going on, you will see connections to things that you're grieving. And if you choose to do that every day or every week, like, first responders need to be doing that every day, because they are facing things on a daily basis that there's no place to put that. The belief is, right, that you just sit it aside, but that's not what happens. You sit it in the gallbladder or in the liver or in the brain tumor you sit it somewhere, and it has an impact. So when you turn and you face it, it feels a lot less scary.
Mm-hmm. I don't think we have just not been taught this at all. This is
No,
not part of Life 101. We didn't
no.
learn how to write a check and also how to grieve.
You know what's funny? I didn't even learn how to write a check. Like, I think about that. Like, in my upbringing, I did not learn how to balance a checkbook or do any financial anything. But I learned how to grieve, and nobody taught me that. I just came in with that. So none of us are really taught any actual life skills. I mean, it's varying, meaning it's something that, yes, our communities, our churches, our whatever communities are meant to support the people of the community should, that's the fantasy, is we believe that they should be doing this for us, but they don't.
Mm-hmm. It's fascinating. In 2008, I had a burnout breakdown experience. And
Mhm,
in the process, I chose, with help, to get on some anti-anxiety and antidepressant medication.
mhm,
I got a brain scan through Dr. Daniel Amen. He has the Amen Clinic. He wrote Change Your Brain, Change Your Life. And
mhm.
going through that process really helped me. And about 4 years ago, after having been on these antidepressants for 13 years, I was
Yeah.
like, I'm not feeling in the way that I want to feel. I couldn't feel love. I
Yes.
could, and I couldn't feel I didn't feel like I could be the recipient of love. I could think
Yes.
loving thoughts. I could do
Right.
loving acts, but I couldn't feel it. And I thought, I'm really missing out on something, like the full
Yeah.
spectrum. So I titrated off the antidepressant medication
Mhm,
now, fully, about 3.5, 4 years ago. And I
mhm.
still take a bit of anti-anxiety medication that really helps me. It gets rid of the buzz and allows me
Yeah.
to focus and have, great conversations. So as I titrated off this, I'm thinking, man, I'm going to get to experience all of this joy and love and these good feelings that I haven't necessarily been feeling.
Yes.
Prior to being, when I was on the medication, I could really just feel peace or irritation. I got off the
Yes.
medication, and then all of a sudden, I was flooded with grief and
Yes.
pain, and like all the negative feelings. And I'm like, whoa, wait, I didn't want that. I wanted the good feelings. And so I have found that now I have access to this sadness and grief
Yes.
that I didn't have previously.
Right.
And I really don't appreciate it.
Mhm. Well, and so
And yet
let me
it comes and it's there,
yes.
you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
I hear you and I understand, but here's the thing. Grief is the gateway to ecstasy, to vision, to passion, to understanding, and then wisdom. Grief is your gateway to sight.
How is this? Sell me on this.
I'm going to sell you on it. You're going to after this conversation, you're going to be a believer. So, here's the thing. Anytime anybody does medication or they have when you are depressed, you are in resistance to dealing with whatever inner truths are going on,
Mhm.
right? So when we medication just puts that off until we're
Yes.
ready. So when you were
Yes.
ready, you went like, okay, I'm going to get off the medication. Then the grief actually, when we cry for 10 minutes or more, we actually change the neurons in our brain. So you've got your neural pathways. And let's say it says, you know, um, crying is weakness, right? So the only way to get rid of that thought process of crying is weakness is by when you cry for 10 minutes or more. You know what somebody told me? The best advice somebody ever gave to me? is, Tracee, when you cry, I want you to scream it out to the universe. I want you to cry big and loud and hard as you can. And something happened when I always kind of did that, but I was made to feel like I was broken and that nobody could help me, and they were frustrated at their inability to help me, so it was my problem. Right? So I, cried in my own little cocoon and then was out in the real world. But there was a separation between what was real and what I was presenting. Right? So grief is the thing that brought those two me's together. So when you cry for 10 minutes or more, again, be loud and proud, because that's what's opening the portal. Remember that your responses are based on the patterns that you have, and the patterns you have are based on the habits that you have. And our habits that we have came to us karmically, and then how those karmic patterns were nurtured by our fiduciaries as we grew. So if you were taught that boys don't cry, of course you're going to resist that. So be loud, be proud. If you need to go into the closet and scream to high heaven, make sure somebody hears you, right? I mean, that's the point. And when you do that, when you cry, you're sending off chemicals and you are erasing old neurons and creating a space for new ideas to populate in your brain to create new pathways. When that happens, again, grief I'll say in God's world, our grief isn't sadness. Our grief is the call to action that they can hear. So it's like there's this portal between us and the other worlds. And when we cry, that portal opens and we can see and speak to the ancestors. We can understand the angelics. We can connect to the intergalactics. We can see if there are lower entities there, we can see them and decide our relationship to them. Right? But there's freedom that comes if we are willing to walk through that first portal of the grief and then own it and then take authority over it, which isn't to stop grieving, but to imbibe in the process that the grief creates. For example, I had an ancestor. Well, I still have an ancestor, but it was in a past life, I was a curandera, and she was the granddaughter. Well, actually, I'm lying. I was the great grandmother, but this being that was with me, who is the curandera, she was the great granddaughter of this woman. So essentially, this woman that was with me was my great great granddaughter. Okay, and these are all spirits. These are not people today. They are spirits that were connected with me. And every time I would have a bad relationship, I was dating somebody and we broke up, or I could feel him preparing to ghost, or whatever was going on, this wave would come over me and I would just and wail. And every time that happened, it would come through me and my mind would clear and I would see her. I would see myself. And she was always the one saying, I see you and you are okay. This is the path, and she would but I could see her clear as day. That was one of my first relationships to being clairvoyant, was through my grief. So
what is it about grief that opens us up to this otherworldly dimension or this other like, what is it about that does that?
Well, first of all, I'm fairly certain we could say that it's biochemical on a lot of levels. The heart actually gives off very specific hormones when we grieve, that once you are done grieving for that moment, there's an incredible calm that comes afterwards. And in that calm, you can see whatever you want to see. Whatever you call on to see will be shown to you, if that's what you want. when we talk about the pineal gland and a person's ability to be clairvoyant or to see energy, we relate that to DMT, right? You've heard of the chemical
Mhm,
DMT. I
mhm.
can't tell you the whole name because I can't say it. So for all you people, Google DMT. But it is a hallucinogenic chemical that we create, and it's created by the pineal gland, and it allows us the ability to be creative, to vision, to imagine, visualizing things that we want to create or that are already there. It allows us, our brain, to be able to access that information. And when we are grieving and we have, again, belief systems that disallow, like if a person is Christian or they're a fundamentalist and they believe that being psychic is the devil's work, well, that's a hindrance. They've got to choose one. Either they're going to choose their sensitivity and get rid of the directive, right? Or they're going to choose the directive and get rid of the sensitivity. But the truth is, we are all ultra sensitive, so they'll just be in conflict until they are able to go to the next level for themselves. Pardon me, my little kitty has long nails and they're just getting stuck everywhere she is now. There we go. Sorry about that.
No worries, no worries. I want to go back to your definition of grief as this expression of emotion in the midst of or out of or because of the transition. And that definition just resonates so much with me because when I personally think about transitions in my life, I I'm a keeper of things. First of all, I
Yeah,
have boxes of things from my childhood that were important. I have basketball programs of when I used to go to basketball games at university with my
yeah,
dad, and I have it is stuff.
yeah.
Um, and when I look at those things, I have this mixed emotion of warm nostalgia
Hmm.
and sadness. And I don't think it is until and I've always gone like, why do I keep this stuff? And why do I have this sadness when I look at it? But I don't want to get rid of it. And I'm sensing from this conversation, like there's grief within me, perhaps, I don't know if I'm using the right language, that needs to come like be expressed because of the transitions and the things
Right,
that I have perceived that I have lost in these different seasons of life,
right,
right? Um, so I just resonate so much with your definition of this grief in the midst of transition. And so essentially,
right,
what I'm taking from this is that it's almost as if you, as a grief counselor, want us to be grieving every day because we're constantly in transition.
right. Well, I want grief to mean something different. So when I hear you say that, you look at these things, what with that basketball program is a portal to the love you felt from your dad.
Yes.
And when your heart opens to that sadness, I call them tears of truth, is your dad wanting to connect with you.
Hmm.
And if you are willing, when you feel that sadness, you say, "Hi, Dad.
Hmm.
How you doing?"
Hmm.
You'd be surprised what comes next. People think of grief isn't to help you get rid of the past. Grief is to help you understand what is here in your present. The idea when someone dies, they don't die. Their body leaves us, but their spirit oftentimes does not. And so grief is the thing that allows us to make that transition from them in a body to them in spirit, still able to connect. For example, when my mother died, and I'm a psychic, I can talk to anything, anytime, anywhere. But when my mom died for like 4 months, boom, I was blank. And every time I thought of my mom, I would see her death picture. Oh, it was so bad. It was not good. And I was like, "What? Come on." Anyway, so for 4 months, I just was blank. And then finally, this one day, I was home, was feeling sentimental because my mom used to always make chicken soup and it was raining outside. And I was like, God dang, I wish I could remember how to make that chicken soup, like what she put in it. And then I was sad because I went to call her and I'm like, oh, I can't call her. Fuck. Pardon me. I can't, I was so upset that I couldn't call her. And then I'm like, okay, I'm getting really upset now. So, hey, mom, you know, what's in that chicken soup? And then I started getting a list, a list in my mind of the ingredients. And I was like, okay, thank you. I see you. Like I couldn't see her because she was still, I could see the death picture, right? I was still, my body and mind was still processing that she is not in a physical body anymore. You can't call her, you can call her. And even I, as a professional, had to transition, and it was uncomfortable. It was not easy. And I didn't, when love or complication is involved, we relate differently. But again, so the idea of grief is to help us to change our relationship to how something existed to how it exists today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I have all of these. It's so fascinating. Like you talked about, when you're in the presence of someone who has both like this empath gift and all these other gifts, it's so crazy because I talk to a lot of people
Yeah,
that all of a sudden, like all of these things start coming up within me as an interviewer, where I'm like,
absolutely.
oh my gosh, I want to talk to Tracee right now about this, about this, about this, about that. Like these things
Yes,
of things that I have grieved, am grieving, should grieve, could grieve. It's not appropriate for this conversation, but it's so fascinating
yes.
about when you're in the presence with someone. Um, uh, Many of our viewers will know that Mandy and I have a studio here in Orange County with breathwork and meditation and so forth. And I
Right.
teach breathwork regularly. And it's funny because there will be certain people that walk in and
Hmm.
I can feel it. I'm like, whoa, they're that person like you,
Yes,
right? I go, whoa, I could just by their
yes.
hello, just by their hello. I'm like, oh my God. There was a woman who walked in the other day and I was like, whew. And come to find out, she's a like Unity Church pastor and,
Mm,
has all these different gifts and everything, but you can just feel it in the presence of someone. And that is a gift to be able to help those who are not accustomed to grieving, don't know how to grieve, to just create space where it is safe to
right,
grieve. I mean,
right,
our culture is not safe to grieve. It is not productive. It is not moving the ball forward. This is not something we can monetize. If I could monetize grief, that'd be awesome. Uh, but right? Our culture doesn't create safety for it to happen, in my opinion. So,
um I agree with that, but I think that when people in our lives, in any sector of life, whether or not you're a corporate person or wherever you find yourself in life, I learned this in New York because I would cry. I remember I was waiting on tables. I was a waitress, and I'd had this big breakup with this young man, and I was just devastated because it was totally unexpected. So I'm there, and I'm like, okay, and did you want a red wine or white with that? Okay. Okay, did you want a Caesar or the chopped? Okay, okay, I'll have that right out, thanks. Caesar or the chopped? Okay, okay, I'll have that right out, thanks. Ooh, everybody that came in were pretty much regulars, and so they just let me be me. That when you own where you're at, and I'm not saying to break down at the board meeting, but don't be ashamed if you break down at the board meeting, or if you need to take 5 minutes to go, bawl in the cry your eyes out in the bathroom or whatever, and then come back and say, yeah, I was frustrated, I need to let it go, I'm back now. But when you own it, people in life who own where they're coming from and where they're at,
mm,
nobody messes with them.
mhm,
That's the
mhm.
truth.
Mhm.
Like I would be bawling my eyes out on the subway for 30 minutes on my, route to work. And so, like, usually it was the unhoused people or other people who were sensitive. They would look at me and they'd, kind of gauge to see if, where I was at. And some would say, "You okay?" And I'm like, or people would just come sit next to me and kind of warm me. Like
Mhm.
I've had that, when you let yourself be where you're at, you give other people permission to not fix it. And
Mm.
that's the thing. Our society can't stand criers, and they shun that because they live in this fantasy that they can or have to fix it.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
that's the thing. Just because you're crying doesn't mean that something is broken and needs to be fixed. It's a bridge for you and your understanding. And that's the first thing that when I'm working with somebody who uh they have, there's oftentimes when somebody dies in the family uh constellation, there's always conflict or issue between this person or that person. And so I always recommend for people to say, "Hey, I understand that my crying makes you uncomfortable, but get over it. You don't have to do anything for me. Letting you know now, you don't need to do anything for me. I will not be offended if you walk away. I will not be offended if you just stand there. We are good. I will get through it myself, and that's okay." Right?
Mm.
If you can have those kinds of conversations, we see this a lot in long-term illness, right? Everybody at some point is going to have their relationship with grief. And there's conflict again based on somebody's ability to just let another person do what they need to do and not make a thing about it. You don't want nothing, don't make nothing.
Mm. My goodness, this is just a wonderful conversation, a masterclass on grief. I'm curious about the concept of channeling because that is
Mhm.
something that you have a ability to do, and I'm also curious about how that might be connected to grief in some way.
So, grief and grieving are the first tools that we use to channel. Grief is what clears the channel to be open to these new ideas, possibly new ideas or new information or just information from a place that we are not expecting. So when we grieve, again, it clears the space for us. It clears our heart. It clears our mind, at least for a little time, to be able to receive. And everybody channels all the time. I mean, being telepathic is a form of channeling. People most often see how they channel when they're in a relationship, especially love or sexual relationships, because when you have that intimacy, you have this connection of energy constantly going from one person to the other wherever you are in the world. We also give that gift to twins. Anybody who's a twin, we say, "Oh yes, we accept that they can do that." But the fact is we all do it, right? And depending on your relationship, some people in discordant relationships have learned to numb each other out, right? There was a bond and then they cut it off because it was too much or they didn't know how to deal with it, right? So we whether we are embracing it or resisting it, there is still a relationship to the way in which we cord into people or telepathically communicate or receive higher frequency messages.
Hmm. I'm curious if you would want to. We had talked about it previously. You bringing a message, a channeled message. Perhaps it's about grief, and I know that everybody channels differently. So I'm just curious. Would you be interested
Yeah,
in bringing a message today?
of course. Okay, hold
Do you
on. Let
need
me
do
just.
you do you need to grieve first to clear the channel? Should we have a cry? Let's have a cry session here for a second to clear the channel. That would be awesome. That's a good marketing tool. I'm gonna channel. Give me a second.
Exactly. Okay. What I do need to do is just take a moment.
Mhm.
When we ask why, we are channeling to someone, to something, to ourselves, to understand the multiple dimensions of a situation or experience. But oftentimes we refuse the answer. So when you ask why, be willing to receive the answer. Why did this happen to me? Why is this happening? What is this? Why am I like this? Right? All of those whys are their own separate bidding to the universe. It's a chord that you send out for someone to receive or something to receive, and they will receive it. So be willing to receive the answer. You are your most potent when you are consolidated, right? So your energy is focused. Your energy doesn't have to be clear. It doesn't have to be unemotional. It just has to be present, because that's the point at which you have all that you are to break through and create any connection that you need to, like any channel out there to receive what it is that you're looking for. A lot of people are looking for a lot of things right now, but they refuse the answer when it's not what they expected it to be, not what they wanted it to be. So you can tell resistance is the first line of refusal. That's not true. That can't be right. Oh, I don't think that's right. Oh, no. And the more quickly you say no, it's probably yes. So the message today is to take stock of what questions you have waiting out there, waiting for answers, and pull each one back by taking the answer. The answer is there for you. Take it in, pull it in, because that's going to help you to feel empowered in what you do next. And scene.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you so
Mm-hmm.
much. Yeah. Well, what are the ways that people can work with you in terms of their grief?
Mm-hmm.
How can people connect with you and get your support?
Um, you can connect to me on social media. Almost all my social medias are at Go Tracee or at Tracee Dunblazier. You can book a session at heal.me/Tracee Dunblazier. And then you can see everything that I do, all of my news media, all of that stuff at traceedunblazier.com. And of course, that is Tracee with 2 E's.
Yes. And we will have all of those links in the show notes, of course. One of the things that you have coming up is you'll be speaking at Conscious Life Expo in February
Yes.
2026 on this topic. And
Yes.
so tell us a little bit about the presentation and why people should join you there.
Well, I'm going to be, it's really going to be fun. I'm teaching basically Channeling 101, which is going to help people understand not only how they are already channeling, but I'm going to give you a protocol that you can use to deliberately begin to channel information so that you feel connected, comfortable, safe, at ease with the process. So, and
Awesome.
it's going to be on the Monday. It's the after conference workshops that they have. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Awesome.
I'll be teaching a protocol that was taught to me and has been, I don't know, for the first time it made me understand, it made me able to visualize what's happening. So that's what I'm going to be offering people.
Wonderful. And people, of course, can get tickets at consciouslifeexpo.com. So
Mm-hmm.
Tracee, what a wonderful conversation with you. Thank you so much. We could have talked about a million different subjects, and I love that we honed in on your book and encourage people to
Yes.
pick this book up, Transformative Grief, an Ancient Ritual of Healing for Modern Times, and really
Yes.
encourage you to pick up the book. We'll have the link in the show notes as well. So, Tracee, thanks. It's great to be with you.
So good to see you too. I really enjoyed this today.
Thanks for listening to the Awaken Magazine podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and our other conversations, would you mind taking a moment to leave a 5-star review and maybe even a comment on Spotify or Apple Podcasts? That's one of the ways that you can give back to the show and help us reach more people. And of course, feel free to share the episode with a friend. And if you're not already on our email list, we send out an inspiring email every Monday morning full of articles and interviews. Just head on over to awakenedmagazine.com and click subscribe and join for free. Our hope is that all the resources we share will help our world continue awakening to love.